Politeness is a beautiful lie. It looks like kindness. It feels like virtue, but in the hands of the wrong people or in the wrong moments. It's a weapon not against them, against you. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He didn't despise manners. He despised misplaced manners. Because to him, there are moments when being polite doesn't just make you look weak. It makes you a target. Politeness, when used blindly, sends a clear message. I care more about being liked than being respected. I want to avoid tension, even if it means betraying my own instinct. I'd rather keep the peace than win the game. And when predators, manipulators, opportunists, or power seekers pick up on that, they don't feel grateful. They feel invited. So Machiavelli would tell you there are moments where you must abandon courtesy, where you must abandon niceties, smiles, and soft tones, where your thank you turns into silence, where your sorry becomes that's your problem, where your handshake becomes a refusal, not because you're becoming cruel, but because you're finally waking up. So here it is, the first of 5 situations where being polite is a liability. When someone crosses a boundary you never gave them permission to test. There are people who don't ask for power. They test for it. They push lightly. They invade slightly. They say something just inappropriate. Enough. They step a bit too close. They speak over you in conversation and look at you like you interrupted them. And when this happens, what do most people do? They smile. They laugh nervously. They try to maintain the mood. They say things like, "Oh, no worries, it's totally fine. Ha ha ha, yeah, I guess I'm being sensitive." Machiavelli would call this moment a turning point, because right here, this is where they're measuring you. And if you respond with politeness, they now know something about you that can't be unseen. You would rather keep the atmosphere light than assert your space. You would rather be liked than be respected. And once they know that, they'll return, not as a friend, but as a handler. Machiavelli would tell you to flip the script. Don't escalate. Don't argue, but make it cold. Make it unmistakable. Look them in the eye. Say, "Don't do that again." Or simply, "I didn't give you permission." Or say, "Nothing." Just pause. Let silence sink into the room. Then walk away. The silence you leave will ring louder than your explanation ever could. And it will say everything they need to hear. I am not the one. Another situation is when someone apologizes just to manipulate you. Not all apologies are apologies. Some are invitations to drop your guard. Watch closely. They betray you then. Immediately apologize. But it's not deep. It's not sincere. It's rehearsed. They want your forgiveness on schedule. They want your kindness on command. And you being polite feel the pressure. You don't want to seem bitter. You don't want to drag it out. So you say, "It's okay." You say, "I understand." You say, "I forgive you." But what you've really said is, you can get away with it. You can reset the board anytime just by acting remorseful. You control when the healing starts. Machiavelli would burn that instinct to the ground. He would tell you there is no virtue in forgiving someone who weaponizes your desire to appear polite. You don't owe anyone comfort just because they said sorry. You don't have to receive every apology. You don't have to make it easier for the person who made your life harder. Instead, pause. Let their apology land and go nowhere. Say nothing or say, "I heard you," or "Thanks for saying that, but it doesn't change anything." That isn't bitterness. That's sovereignty. And a manipulator's greatest fear is a person they can't soothe back into submission. Consider also when you're dealing with a chronic victim. You've met this person. Every story they tell makes them the hero and the victim. They're always being attacked, left out, disrespected, ignored. And every time they talk to you, they want validation, not truth, not clarity, just your pity. And when you try to be polite, you nod. You agree. You say, "That's so unfair." You get pulled into the script. But here's what's actually happening. They're feeding off your politeness, your patience, your emotional labor, and slowly, without realizing it, you become their emotional servant. Machiavelli would never tolerate this dynamic. He would see it instantly for what it is: emotional parasitism. He would detach. He would break the loop. He would say, "You always seem to be in the same pattern. Do you ever take responsibility for your part, or say nothing and change the subject completely?" This kind of cold disruption snaps their power out because they can't feed on silence. They can't loop someone who won't play the game. These are just the first three moments where politeness, if left unchecked, doesn't serve you. It exposes you. It opens doors that should have stayed shut. It tells people you'll let them in even when you shouldn't. But Machiavelli's way was different. He wasn't rude. He was intentional. And when he removed politeness from a moment, it was like cutting off oxygen from a flame. The chaos died. The manipulation stopped. The fake apologies evaporated. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to be cruel. He simply chose presence over performance. Some people will tell you that politeness is always the higher road. But Machiavelli knew better. He understood that in many situations, politeness is not strength. It's submission disguised as virtue. And it's most dangerous when it's automatic. When you respond with a smile, not because you feel peace, but because you're afraid to show fire. This politeness has become the most socially accepted form of self-betrayal and the most respectable-looking way to lose all control of your life. Let's go further. The fourth situation is when time is being wasted deliberately. There are two kinds of time wasters in this world: the oblivious and the calculating. You can forgive the first, but the second, the one who talks in circles, delays answers, books meetings with no purpose, keeps you hanging just to assert their control. That person is not just disorganized. They're testing your tolerance. They want to see how long you'll sit there, how long you'll wait on them, how far you'll stretch your schedule for their indecision. And if you respond with politeness, if you smile, nod, and reassure them, it's okay. Take your time. You failed the test. You've now told them, my time doesn't matter unless you decide it does. And that too, Machiavelli, was one of the highest forms of weakness. Why? Because once your time is negotiable, so is your power. And once someone senses that they can hijack your momentum with a casual delay, you become their puppet on a leash made of calendar, invites, and emotional courtesy. Machiavelli would never allow this. He would interrupt. He would cut short. He would leave, not out of ego, but because he knew time is the one resource you never negotiate. So here's what to do when someone wastes it deliberately. Stop smiling. Don't excuse their delay. Say, let me know when you're ready to move forward. Or better yet, this doesn't seem like a priority to you. Let's revisit when it is. That one sentence will do more than hours of polite follow-ups, because suddenly you're the scarce resource and no one disrespects what they fear losing. The fifth situation is when someone is trying to intimidate you with passive power. This is the trickiest situation of all. You're not being yelled at. You're not being insulted directly, but you feel it. The condescension, the silent treatment, the veiled sarcasm, the way they say your name just a little too slowly, the slight pause before they respond just long enough to imply dominance. And you, being polite, try to maintain the peace. You respond evenly. You smile. You act above it. But inside, you feel small. And the worst part is, they can tell because their power isn't coming from words. It's coming from your reaction. Machiavelli understood this form of psychological combat better than anyone. He studied the silent aggressors. He knew that some people don't attack you to provoke a response. They attack just below the surface to test your self-image. And if you stay polite, they win. Because politeness in this context is submission without resistance. It tells them, I'll let you chip at my frame as long as you don't do it too loudly. No, you hold frame. You don't need to match their energy. You just need to strip the emotional bait of its power. How? You take away their audience, their reward, their edge. They speak with implied dominance. You interrupt them mid-sentence with, let's stay focused. Or, if there's something, to say it directly. You stare without flinching. You speak without smiling. You remove all softness from your tone, not with aggression, but with cold neutrality. That is how Machiavellians win, not by raising volume, but by lowering tolerance. Here's what you need to internalize. In each of these 5 situations, the world wants you to be polite. It expects it. It's counting on it. Because politeness makes you predictable. And predictable people are easy to box, manipulate, dismiss. But when you become strategic with your politeness, when it's no longer a default, but a tool, you become something rare, someone who cannot be steered. Let's be clear, this isn't about becoming rude. It's about becoming unshakable. It's about signaling to the world, I choose when to be soft. You don't get to decide that for me. You walk into a room with that energy, and suddenly the power dynamic flips, because politeness has been society's leash on you since childhood. It trained you to smile when disrespected, to laugh when uncomfortable, to apologize for simply existing. Machiavelli would have spit on that leash, not to be edgy, but to be free. So, if you're ever unsure, ask yourself this. Am I being polite because I mean it, or because I'm afraid of what happens if I'm not? If it's fear, drop it. If it's instinct, sharpen it. If it's habit, break it. Because there's a time for manners, and there's a time for cold presence, and only the dangerous know the difference. Politeness has its place, but Machiavelli knew that most people have no idea where that place is. They confuse politeness with morality, with decency, with virtue. But in truth, politeness is just a mask, and masks are useful until they start suffocating you. When you wear it for the wrong people, or in the wrong moments, it doesn't protect your image. It dilutes it, and slowly you stop existing as a person of power and become a personality of comfort. The people around you begin to know you not by your boundaries, your principles, or your clarity, but by your ability to make everyone feel good, even at your own expense. Machiavelli would never allow this kind of erosion. He didn't believe in cruelty for its own sake, but he believed in selective coldness, because the one who is always polite is the one who's always available. And the one who's always available is eventually taken for granted, or worse, used as a pawn. So here's how to flip the dynamic entirely. Let's now examine how these principles play out in real life and how to install them in your psychology so deeply they become your new baseline. 8. First, redefine what politeness is. Politeness is often mistaken for not interrupting, not disagreeing, letting people finish, smiling when uncomfortable, saying it's okay even when it's not, or letting things slide for the sake of peace. But this isn't politeness. This is emotional compliance. True politeness is a chosen salnai, posture, not a default position. It is only powerful when it's optional. If you can't turn it off, then it isn't a strategy, it's a weakness. Machiavelli's real law. A man is only respected when people know he could go cold at any moment. Second, master the politeness to cold switch. There should be a visible shift in your presence when a line is crossed. Someone invades your time. You go from warm to unreadable in seconds. Someone plays games with your kindness. You stop talking, stop explaining, stop engaging. People learn quickly who they can joke with, test, delay, push, and the ones who win in life are not the most agreeable. They are the ones who teach people how to approach them. Politeness, when used sparingly, becomes a signal of control because it shows you're choosing peace, not being forced into it. Third, strip sorry from your core vocabulary. One of the biggest signs of unconscious politeness is chronic apology. You apologize when you ask for clarity. You apologize when someone else is late. You apologize for your tone, even if your words were true. You apologize for saying no. Machiavelli would have torn this habit out at the root. Why? Because apologizing for boundaries sends the same signal as not having them at all. It's one thing to apologize for real harm, but most of what people apologize for in modern life is simply being firm. And firm people aren't cruel, they're trusted, they're followed, they're not pushed. Replace "sorry I can't" with "that won't work for me." Replace "sorry for the delay" with "here's the update." Replace "sorry I was" blunt with silence. Watch how quickly your aura changes. People don't want to test the one who never apologizes for strength. Fourth, don't escape the tension. Use it. Here's what most people don't realize. Politeness is often just a way to escape the tension of the moment. Someone gives you backhanded praise. You smile awkwardly. A sea orca cuts you off. You laugh it off. A family member invades your decision-making. You say, I know, to avoid conflict. But Machiavelli would have leaned into that tension, not to escalate it, but to own it. He would have said, you're trying to control this. That's not going to happen. Or, if you're not done, I'll wait. But I'm not moving forward until you are. Or, you don't have to agree with me, but I don't need your permission either. These are the phrases of someone who no longer uses politeness to diffuse discomfort, but instead uses presence to dominate it. Because silence is powerful, stillness is loud, and when you hold your frame through discomfort, the other person feels it more deeply than any smile ever could. Fifth, make politeness a strategy, not an identity. This is the shift Machiavelli would have trained into you. Stop being a polite person. Start being a dangerous person who can choose to be polite. Let your politeness be unsettling. Let it be sharp, controlled, measured, not soft and obliging, but strategic. Be the kind of person who, when they say, thank you, I appreciate that, no worries, people pay attention because they know it could just as easily have been, that's not acceptable. Don't speak to me that way. Or simply silence. The man who always speaks softly is forgettable. But the man who is polite by choice, he becomes the storm everyone else adjusts their sails for. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to break things. You don't need to act like an edgelord to prove you're powerful. You just need to withdraw politeness in the moments where weakness expects it and give politeness only to those who've earned it. That's what Machiavelli would do. And that's what makes a person unforgettable. Not because they're loud, but because they were the only one you couldn't predict. Politeness is a currency, and like any currency, its value drops when you give it out too easily. Machiavelli didn't fear being disliked. He feared being disrespected, because respect, not affection, is the foundation of power. Affection fades, but fear of your coldness that lingers. And here's what most people never realize. The people who truly respect, you don't need you to be polite. They need you to be clear, firm, uncompromising when it matters. When you master strategic politeness, your presence changes. You stop blending in. You start setting the tone in every room you walk into. Let's now bring it all together and make it impossible to forget. Here are 5 commandments of Machiavellian politeness. 1. Politeness is earned, not distributed. You don't owe please and thank you to people who violate your space, waste your time, or use passive aggression. You can treat them with dignity, yes, but not with comfort. Comfort is reserved. 2. Never be polite to avoid conflict. If avoiding conflict costs you your self-respect, it's not a win, it's surrender. Real power is being willing to lose a fake friendship for the sake of keeping your inner authority intact. 3. Politeness is not the same as morality. You can be moral and unpolite. You can be good and cold. You can be just and terrifying. Don't let shallow culture confuse you into believing that the warmest person is always the wisest. That's how manipulators survive. 4. When in doubt, go silent. Silence is more powerful than any polite phrase could ever be. It does what sorry and thank you cannot. It makes people feel your presence instead of analyzing your words, and it forces them to break the tension, not you. 5. If they mistake your politeness for weakness, punish them with absence. The most Machiavellian move isn't confrontation. It's withdrawal. Not to be petty, but to signal one thing clearly. Access to me is not unconditional. Now you might ask, how do I use this power without losing my humanity? What if I go too far? What if I become cold in situations that don't deserve it? Here's the key. You're not removing politeness from your toolkit. You're removing it from your default identity. Right now, you've been trained to be polite as a reflex. The way a servant bows when the master walks by. The way prey avoids eye contact with a predator. This isn't kindness. This is pre-installed submission. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in denying human warmth. It was in knowing when warmth is suicide. He would tell you, be polite to those beneath you, but never let them think you're soft. Be polite to those beside you, but only when respect is mutual. Be polite to those above you, but only to buy time until you've replaced them. Everything else, calculated silence. Consider the internal shift from automatic to strategic. Politeness shouldn't flow automatically. It should trigger questions in the minds of others. Why is he polite to me? What would happen if I crossed the line? Has he gone cold with others? When people ask those questions about you, you're no longer just pleasant. You're a presence. You're a variable. And variables are what Machiavelli loved most because they keep everyone else slightly off balance. You don't need them confused, just uncertain, because the uncertain man never tries to control you. He's too busy calculating what you might do next. There is also the final moment when to cut politeness entirely. There comes a moment in every power dynamic where someone presses too far. They ignore your subtle cues. They test you once too often. They smile while pushing a silent disrespect across the table. This is the moment where the average person still tries to maintain rapport, still tries to smooth things over, still plays diplomat. But you cut the cord. You don't fight. You don't explain. You don't escalate. You go still. You go silent. You go blank. You drain all warmth from the room and leave them with the consequences of misreading you. And in that moment, they feel it. This is not a person I can handle the way I handle others. That sentence, unspoken but felt, is your true Machiavellian signature. The closing truth is that politeness is a tool, not a truth. You are not here to be digestible. You are not here to be light at all costs. You are not here to explain every decision, to smile through every violation, to soften every strong sentence. You are here to move, to build, to command your space, and make them adjust to your presence. If they misinterpret your coldness, let them. If they call you rude, distant, intimidating, let them. Because they're mistaking strategy for cruelty. And that's not your problem. Your problem is this. Every time you're polite in a moment where you should be firm, every time you say it's okay when it's not, every time you smile when you should be silent, you're teaching them how to treat you. And worse, you're teaching yourself that your power is optional. It's not. So be polite when it's earned. And when it's not, be Machiavellian. Let the silence speak. Let the coldness land. Let the tension burn. Because in the end, they won't remember the words you said.